All right, y'all. What's up, man? So this case is getting. First of all, this is the United States of America versus Dion Gatlin, which we all know is Cuffy. I do not wish to slander, defame, harm. What's the other word I'm looking for? Libel anybody as it relates to this case. I will be coming from the Franks hearing dated January 9th, 2017. This is a 192-page document. We're going to be talking about the cross-examination of Keith Cromer, who was the group supervisor of the DA in Atlanta during the Cuffy investigation. The investigation initially starts in Atlanta, but then St. Louis takes over, and Cuffy then eventually gets arrested in St. Louis. So what we have here is right now Joanne Trogg, who is Cuffy's legal representative. I think she's a public defender. She is questioning Keith Cromer after Humphrey has already questioned Keith Cromer. Now, August the 5th, 2012 is a key date. It's a key date. August the 5th, 2012. Now, if we remember, this is the day in the motion to suppress wiretaps, the first document that we covered, which was a 32-page document, where it talked about Tammy Cowins is receiving multiple calls from Fidel Suarez telling her, I got guys up there with a truck. Where is Cuffy? And Tammy Cowins is calling Cuffy. Cuffy is calling back to Tammy Cowins, and Tammy Cowins eventually puts Cuffy and Suarez together on this date, August the 5th, 2012. Allegedly, supposedly. Now, the video we did this morning, August the 5th, 2012, is also the same date that one of Keith Cromer's agents that reports to him, y'all see Luna, puts in a DEA 499 for an award for Tammy Cowins on August the 5th, 2012 for $80,750. August 5th, 2012. Now, Joanne Trogg, who is Cuffy's representative, legal representative, is asking Keith Cromer on the stand. Another thing. Well, let's keep going. I'm going to come back to that. I'm sharp on the top of the dome. I'm coming off the top of the dome, but I know what I'm talking about because I've read this page, this document line by line. We also know that on August the 5th, 2012, it's been discussed. Cromer's been questioned. Tammy Cowins has been questioned about what exactly happened on August 5th, 2012. Now, this date is also referenced in the affidavit for the for the Title III wiretaps. And if you remember, going way back on August the 6th, Task Force Officer Lang, I think he's out of DEA St. Louis, debriefs Tammy Cowins about what transpired on August the 5th, 2012. And she corroborates everything that she says supposedly happened on August the 5th, 2012. Now, Tammy Cowins has been on the stand giving two different versions about what happened in her role on August the 5th, 2012. She said that this is around, what was it, 10 o'clock in the morning or 12 noon, that she starts receiving calls from Fidel Suarez. And Fidel Suarez is trying to get in touch with Cuffy to pick up some drugs that Fidel Suarez has sent to St. Louis, and that a truck is already there. And where the hell is Cuffy? He's been trying to call Cuffy. I've been trying to call Cuffy. He can't get in touch with Cuff. So he starts calling Tammy Cowins' phone back to back, 17 times in 14 minutes or something to that effect. 14 times in 17 minutes. Cuffy eventually gets in touch with Tammy. Tammy tells Cuffy, yo, where you been? Suarez is trying to reach you. Call him. This is his number. She eventually hooks them up. This is what she says. This is August the 5th, 2012. Tammy Cowins also gives the account that one time she says she has Keith Cromer on a three-way. And that her, Keith Cromer, and Suarez, that he's listening into this conversation. This is what Tammy Cowins says. One version of her story. Then she changes that up and says that, nope, Keith Cromer was there with me in the house. I had him on speakerphone. And Keith Cromer heard everything. Two different conflicting versions about what happened on August the 5th, 2012, as told by Tammy Cowins. Come to find out, we know that on August the 5th, 2012, Keith Cromer was out of town in South Carolina at a family reunion. So he couldn't have been there to listen on speakerphone. And he's been questioned about his whereabouts on August the 5th, 2012. And it was supported and proven that he was out of town because they looked at his credit card records. But when they ask him, when every attorney has asked Keith Cromer, did he speak with Tammy Cowins on August the 5th, 2012, he says, man, I can't remember. But he gives testimony that he remembers on August the 5th, 2012, that he was watching the Olympics and that a man by the name of Galen Rupp won the 10,000 meter track and field event. He won a bronze medal. He remembers all of that. He remembers where he was, but he can't remember if he spoke to Tammy Cowins on that day, August the 5th, 2012, on a big day. This date hinges on everything. Joanne Traub, Cuffy's attorney, is asking Keith Cromer on the stand, when did you first learn about Cuffy? When did you learn that? When did Tammy Cowins tell you about Cuffy or Cuff? That's what they reference him in the documents, Cuff. When did you learn that Tammy Cowins had Big Meech's life rights? When did you learn that Tammy Cowins had power of attorney over Big Meech, Demetrius Flannery? When did you first speak to the DEA in St. Louis? Was it on August the 5th, 2012? Was that the first day you spoke to DEA St. Louis, August 5th, 2012, when supposedly all of these things were going down with the phone with Fidel looking for Cuff? Or did you speak with DEA St. Louis before this? Keith Cromer says, I can't remember. I can't recollect. Keith Cromer testifies on the stand that, and shout out to Keith Cromer, no disrespect to Keith Cromer, all due respect, Keith Cromer. All blessings to Keith Cromer. His son passes away. No disrespect to Keith Cromer or his son. He takes a leave of absence for about 6 weeks. He comes back to the office in October 2011. Tammy Cowins is trying to turn in everybody under the sun, going in people's bank records and looking if they got a lot of real estate and a lot of money, and, you know, not having no proof that they have done anything wrong, but that they just amassed a lot of wealth. And she's turning it over to the DEA. And when Keith Cromer comes back, the agents tell him this is what she's doing. He immediately steps to her and say, look, man, we don't do this, man. You can't put no strike on nobody's name or invade people's privacy just because they got a lot of money. You want to put them in our database. Don't do that. We don't do that. We only focus on drug traffickers from source countries, mid to upper level drug traffickers. This is in October 2011. Jack Harvey retires July 2011. So when Keith Cromer tells her that in October 2011, gets her straight, she mentions Fidel Suarez and Cuffy. That's what he said. That's when their names came out her mouth. This is 2011. Now, she's supplying all kinds of information to Keith Cromer and his group, Group 2, DEA Atlanta, about Cuff. Keith Cromer at the time, 2011, says he doesn't know anything about Cuffy other than what Tammy Cowins has told him. He takes the telephone numbers that Tammy Cowins gives him for Fidel Suarez, takes the telephone number that Tammy Cowins gives him for Cuffy, puts it into the DEA database. A hit comes back for Fidel Suarez out in LA. He reaches out to his LA friend, talks about Fidel Suarez, leaves that to LA. Nothing comes back on Cuff. So he says, we've gone over that. Now, Joanne Trogg, Cuffy's lawyer, is trying to understand when did Keith Cromer first speak to DEA St. Louis. He says he can't recollect. Joanne Trogg asks him, did you speak to DEA St. Louis on August the 5th, 2012? I don't know, maybe. Maybe a day before. The day after, August the 6th. She's asking him, you can't recollect? Nah. Did you speak to them prior to August 5th, 2012? I don't know. I can't recall. So, August the 5th, 2012 is when Tammy Cowins gets put in for an award for $80,750 for some work that was questionable at best about what she might or might not have done, that CS2 was mostly involved in, for a separate case, for a separate investigation, not the Cuffy Suarez investigation, for another investigation. Her award gets put in on August the 5th, 2012. He remembered that when Humphrey was questioning him. He can't remember if he spoke to Tammy Cowins on August the 5th, 2012. He can't remember if he spoke to DEA St. Louis on August 5th, 2012. He can't remember if that was the first time he ever spoke to DEA St. Louis on August the 5th, 2012. But he can remember that he put her in for an award. Now, keep in mind that we know that in 2012, and I don't know if it's around this time, before or after, the head of the St. Louis DEA office transfers from St. Louis to Atlanta and becomes the special agent in charge of the Atlanta office. Leaves St. Louis, comes to Atlanta, 2012. Joanne Traub, Cuffy's lawyer, brings up in her questioning of Keith Cromer. She says, Keith Cromer, what if I told you there never was a truck in St. Louis? That didn't exist? That there were no drugs, there was no truck in St. Louis? He tells her, well, it's not uncommon for drugs not to be found by authorities. That happens all the time. She comes back and she says, what if I told you nobody in St. Louis, not the St. Louis PD or the DEA St. Louis, even looked for the truck? He says, I can't tell you what somebody did or may have done or didn't do and why they may have did it or didn't do it. I can't tell you. Very interesting. Why is Cuffy's lawyer implying and stating in court and questioning a government witness under oath and telling them that there was never no truck in St. Louis on that day? So essentially what she is saying is that that whole story is a lie. August 5th, 2012 is a lie as far as what's referenced in the motion to suppress and what's referenced in the affidavit used to get the Title III wiretaps, that Suarez was calling Tammy to put him in touch with Cuff, and Cuff gets in. That all of that was some bullshit, was just a lie. And maybe used to support putting in this award for Tammy Cowins on August the 5th, 2012. Which we know, when we went over Jack Harvey's cross-examination or direct examination under oath in the Franks hearing, Tammy Cowins tells him in, I think it's 2015 or 2014, She's gotten $80,750 and she doesn't know why. These are just the facts. I don't want to speculate. I have my own opinion about what I think happened, but I'm just giving you what's in the documents. You piece it together however you see fit. While Joanne Trogg is questioning Keith Cromer about August 5th, 2012, he contradicts himself on prior testimony. And I think even in this particular questioning, and he begins to obfuscate and talk about the affidavit as it relates to August 5th, 2012. But Cuffy's lawyer says, look, hold up, man. Chill. I'm not talking about the affidavit. Forget about the affidavit. When did you first speak to DEA St. Louis? To me, in my rational, prudent mind, and I could be wrong as two left shoes, if I knew that a deal was going to go down between Suarez and Cuff on August the 5th, 2012, because obviously I would know, because obviously Tammy would know, and she would relay it to me, because I don't think Homeboy's just going to drive up there. He might, with a truckload of drugs, and and Cuff wasn't expecting it. I'm sure they had to, I'm going to be up there on such and such date. When I get there, I'm going to call your girl, you know what I'm saying? We're going to get together, we're going to do this. So I would think that being the rational case, that you would reach out to DEA St. Louis before August 5th, 2012 to let them know, this is what's going down August 5th, 2012. So St. Louis would have been ready and could have spotted the truck, spotted Suarez, spotted Cuff, put a tail on Cuff, tail on Suarez. I said put a tail on like I'm 5'0". I'm talking like 5'0 now. I ain't no 5'0, nigga. I ain't never been 5'0. Pull my paperwork. I know you already did. Shit clean. It's just too many inconsistencies with August 5th, 2012. Joanne Trogg, cross-examination. Good afternoon, Mr. Cromer. Good afternoon. Agent Cromer, do you recall when Tammy Cowins first became a confidential informant? Cromer, no, sir. I'm sorry. No, ma'am. Trogg, is it your understanding that when she became a confidential source, that she worked for Jack Harvey, for Agent Harvey? Keith Cromer, yes, ma'am. Agent Harvey retired in probably late July 2011, sir. Is that correct? Cromer, yes, ma'am. And then you brought Tammy Cowins under your control. Would that be a fair statement? Cromer, no, ma'am. CS1, Tammy Cowins was assigned to Task Force Officer Smith, Task Force Officer Aguilar at that time. I just reassigned. So now we know that this Task Force Officer Smith got subpoenaed to come to this Franks hearing. This nigga didn't even show up, didn't respond to the subpoena, didn't even come. We know that Task Force Officer Aguilar took the fifth and gets fired. So this is who he says Tammy Cowins was assigned to. Trogg, but you were their senior agent. Is that correct, sir? No, ma'am. I was supervisor of the group. At some point, Agent Cromer, you began a relationship with Tammy Cowins outside the office. Is that correct? Keith Cromer. I talked about personal things. Yes, ma'am. After my son passed away. No disrespect, Keith Cromer, about your son. Joanne Trogg, yes, sir. And that began to occur in late 2011 or early 2012. Keith Cromer, yes, ma'am. Trogg, and in prior testimony, you had discussed some trips and some outside activities with regards to Tammy Cowins. Is that correct, sir? Cromer, yes, ma'am. Joanne Trog, did Tammy Cowins ever tell you that she knew Demetrius Flannery? Cromer, she told the agents that. Yes, ma'am. Did she tell you that, sir? Cromer, eventually, or the agents told me. Did she ever tell you that she held the life rights or like a power of attorney for Demetrius Flannery? I eventually found that out. Yes, ma'am. Joanne Trog, did Tammy Cowins also tell you that she knew a gentleman by the name of Dion Gatlin long before she started working with the DEA? She's asking Cromer, did he know that Tammy Cowins knew Cuffy long before she started working with Jack Harvey? The only thing she said that she had knew Cuff, not by the name of Dion Gatlin, but just Cuff. Trog, did she tell you that she and Cuff were engaged in a business relationship? Did she ever tell you that? Cromer, no, ma'am. Agent Cromer, you testified about events. I'm going to go back specifically to March of 2012, sir. Cromer, yes, ma'am. And you indicated that that was the first time that you had talked to DEA St. Louis. Is that correct? Cromer, no, ma'am. That's not what I said. In March of 2012 was the first time that I brought Tammy Cowins and CS2 together to speak with one another in reference to Cuffy by working together to formulate a plan. Trog, interruption. So it's your testimony that you never followed up with St. Louis? Keith Cromer, eventually, but in March of 2012, I didn't know St. Louis had any connection. Trog, to Cuff? Keith Cromer, to Fidel Suarez or Cuffy at the time? Okay, so the first time then, Mr. Cromer, that you would have talked to DEA St. Louis would have been in August of 2012. Keith Cromer, I'm not sure when it was, but it was. If the affidavits are saying from August the 5th of 2012, I talked to them sometime period before then. Now, again, it was Joanne Trog. Well, let me stop you. Let me stop you right here. You talked to them on August the 5th, you think? Okay, so you also talked to them before that time? Keith Cromer, negative. What I've just said was I was looking at, based upon you asking about the information from the affidavit, if it says from August the 5th of 2012, before the affidavit, as far as when I spoke to them, I had spoke to them and told them about Cuff at that time. Joanne Trog, okay, let me go back. I don't want to talk about the affidavit. I don't want to talk about the affidavit. Keith Cromer, yes, ma'am. What I'm trying to ascertain, Agent Cromer, is when was the first time that you spoke to DEA St. Louis? Keith Cromer, the date I received the deconfliction case overlap with DEA St. Louis. When you received a what? An overlap, a case overlap notification. I'm sorry, okay, case overlap notification? Yes, ma'am. Now, do we think, Agent Cromer, that was July or was that in August? I'm not sure, but DEA has that in their possession, that date, the exact date. I'm not sure, but the date I received the case overlap, I spoke with the agents. Do you remember what agents you spoke to? I wound up speaking with the supervisor and the case agent of the group. And those were two different individuals, sir. And those were two different individuals? The supervisor and the case agent? Yes, ma'am. It was a conference call with myself and other agents with me in Atlanta and with the agents in St. Louis. What agents were with you in Atlanta, Cromer? I had, who was in the office? Agent Smith, who we know never responded to the subpoena. I don't know if Special Agent Chris Daniels was in there as well, but I know at least one task force officer, Smith, was in the office with me. Now, Task Force Officer Smith is the one who didn't respond to the subpoena from the federal government to come and testify at the Franks hearing. Joanne Trog, and you think that was before August the 5th of 2012? Keith Cromer, I'm not sure. If you look at the case overlap, you would have it on there. Would I be speculating and guessing? That would show it. With regards to August the 5th, 2012, do you recall talking to DEA St. Louis? I don't know in regards to August the 5th. Eventually, yes, but I don't know if on August the 5th did I speak with them on that date or not. Joanne Traub. And simply for purposes of the court's clarification, I mean August the 5th, 2012. So you think you might have, but you're not sure? Yes, ma'am. Would there have been any written documentation regarding the conversation with DA St. Louis? I didn't write any. No, ma'am. Do you know who you spoke to there? Keith Cromer, supervisor of the DEA group in St. Louis and the case agent. And do you recall their names, Mr. Cromer? I don't want to get it wrong, but I know one of them, the agent, I think was Bob or Robert. Okay. But I'm not sure, so I don't want to guess. Joanne Traub. No, I appreciate your honesty there. What did you tell St. Louis about the truck on August the 5th of 2012? Keith Cromer. I thought you were talking about the first time when I spoke to them. If you're talking about on August 5th, 2012, I don't recall if I spoke to them on that date. If another agent did, or we spoke to them the next day in reference to August 5th, so I don't know if it's that date itself. Joanne Traub, what is your recollection that you told them about a truck? If I can read it, Keith Cromer, if I can read it, I don't have that recollection. I would have to read whatever it is, and maybe that will refresh my recollection. Joanne Traub, I wish I had it too, but I don't have anything written from that date from you. Keith Cromer, oh, I didn't write anything. Joanne Traub, you indicated that you may or may not have talked to them on August the 5th, 2012. You might have talked to them on August the 6th, 2012. Keith Cromer, at some later, either on August the 5th or a later date in reference to the investigation itself. Joanne Traub, okay, do you recall any conversation about a tractor-trailer truck? Keith Cromer, yes, ma'am. Because if I have this right, Cuff and Fidel were working together at that time, and Fidel, from what I learned, was a transportation coordinator who was sending drugs from Mexico, his base in California, and sending them out to distribution points in the United States. And I believe at that time that that Fidel was sending a load of drugs to the area of responsibility for Cuff. Joanne Traub, would that be St. Louis? Keith Cromer, yes, ma'am. Joanne Traub, would it surprise you that there was never any tractor trailer of drugs located? Keith Cromer, oh, that wouldn't. Would that surprise me? Joanne Traub, yes, would that surprise you? Keith Cromer, most loads of drugs aren't detected, so that's not uncommon for the drugs not to have been seized by law enforcement. Joanne Traub, would it surprise you that nobody ever looked for a truck? Keith Cromer, I don't know what their actions were, so I can't speculate on being surprised or not being surprised. Whatever actions they took, you would have to ask them about that. This case is wild, man. This case is wild. But it's so interesting, man. It's fascinating. I'll see y'all for another video tomorrow. Go follow me on my Instagram, The Podcast with Soul. Follow me on Spotify, Podcast with Soul. Peace.